Hi, my name's Eric. I'll be reading you selections from today's Cape Cod Times. Today's date is Monday, July 13th of 2026, and we'll start with the weather, as we always do. Across the Cape and Islands today, 80 degrees the expected high, mostly sunny, a steady afternoon breeze, a pretty comfortable day. Tonight, partly cloudy and breezy at times with a low of 67. Becomes a little different tomorrow, Tuesday and Wednesday. Both of those days plan to be pretty warm. Tomorrow, Tuesday, a high of 85, which doesn't sound that bad, but it will be very humid. Mostly sunny, breezy. A low of 73 in the overnight, so it'll be pretty warm in sleeping weather. On Wednesday, partly sunny, a high of 95, a low of 69. It is expected to feel like over 100 degrees on Wednesday with tremendous humidity. A very uncomfortable day. Same for Thursday. Hot, a little less humid, clouds and sun, high of 92. It will feel warmer than that, a low of 68. And on Friday, cloudy, very warm, high of 86, a low of 68. So enjoy today and maybe part of tomorrow. But Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, you may want to make sure your AC is running okay. The sun will rise at 5:18 a.m. It'll set at 8:15 p.m. today. We'll have 14 hours and 57 minutes of daylight. Heading to the front of the paper, where they used to keep the lottery results. And we read these because, well, somebody asked for them. If there's something you would like read to people who are blind or print disabled, you can email us at info@audiblelocalledger.org or call us at 508-539-2030. That's 2030. And we'll consider reading it. And if you miss any of the information that we share in our readings, you can always go to audiblelocalledger.org. It's a fully disability compliant website. Click on the Listen tab, and All Reads to the Blind has 150 chronologically arranged readings, with the most recent at the top, so you'll be able to catch up on anything you might have missed. We also keep a wide variety of periodicals and literature up there for your listening pleasure, as well as the Ledger Actors Workshop with our radio plays done by volunteers, and Supermarket Savings. We have the supermarket circulars, so you'll know what is on sale at the grocery store. All of that is free for people who are blind or print disabled at audiblelocalledger.org. For the latest lottery results, we go to masslottery.com because the Cape Cod Times goes to press too early to give you the latest results. For the numbers game of Sunday, July 12th, in the midday, the winning numbers were 6, 1, 9, 8. Again, yesterday's midday winning numbers, 6, 1, 9, 8. In the evening drawing of the numbers game, the winning numbers were 5, 8, 9, 0. Again, last night's evening winning numbers of the numbers game, 5, 8, 9, 0. Mass cash was drawn yesterday. In the midday, the numbers are 1, 12, 14, 24, and 31. Again, 1, 12, 14, 24, and 31. In the evening of Mass Cash's drawings, 19, 20, 21, 23, and 29. Again, the evening winning numbers for Mass Cash, 19, 20, 21, 23, and 29. Good luck to all who play. Remember us if you win. From the cover of today's Cape Cod Times, rather than a ban, social media bill disables addictive features, by Margie Cullen. The Massachusetts Senate on July 9th passed their own version of a social media bill that aims to crack down on youth access while also addressing the concerns of opponents. In April, the State House passed a bill that would have banned social media for children under 14. But critics, and even some advocates, say that the age verification requirement in the bill raised privacy, First Amendment, and legal concerns. In response, the Senate created a piece of legislation that differed significantly from the House bill, by disabling certain social media features for minors, but not banning access altogether. The bill before us today will limit the addictive power of social media for kids, promote youth mental health, and help teenagers establish more balanced relationships with technology, Senator Cynthia Stone Cream, a Democrat from Newton, said on the Senate floor Thursday. The bill the Senate crafted ensures that it accomplishes these goals without infringing on users' First Amendment rights, without reducing the ability of teenagers to find community online, and without raising data privacy concerns. The bill passed 38-2. Senator Peter Durant, a Republican from Spencer, and Senator Kelly Dooner, a Republican from Taunton, are the only two votes against it. Here's what to know. The Senate's bill requires that all social media platforms adopt default settings for minors that senators say will limit the most addictive aspects of social media and increase safety. Some of these default settings include disabling the algorithmic feed, disabling autoplay and infinite scroll, requiring that users receive a reminder after using the app for 1 hour in a 24-hour period, with reminders following every 30 minutes, turning off notifications from midnight to 6 a.m., disabling the visibility and sharing of precise geolocation data. Minors would not be able to change the default settings, but adults could. To determine the age of the user, social media companies would have to use age assurance methods that are identified by the Attorney General. The methods, however, must either allow them to remain anonymous to the platform or not rely solely on a government issue ID. The bill would also limit the visibility of posts and direct messaging to minors' social media friends or the accounts they're connected with. However, minors could change this default setting themselves. On Thursday, the Senate added several amendments to the bill, including one expanding dark pattern protections. Dark patterns are designs that may trick users into clicking on one button rather than another, like putting one choice in large letters front and center, and another choice small and in the corner. Critics of the House's bill, and another filed by Governor Maura Healey, like digital rights advocacy group Fight for the Future, had said that age verification requirements would stifle free speech, and it would give children's data to social media companies. Others warned that banning kids from social media altogether would also take away its benefits, like giving LGBTQ children access to services or groups that support them. Senators said that their version addresses these concerns. The bill allows anyone to skip age verification and still access social media platforms and all the posts on that platform. This approach ensures that the bill does not infringe on our First Amendment rights, Cream said. Even if users choose to verify their age, Cream said, the bill has additional safeguards. There's an option that allows them to remain anonymous. The collection and use of data is limited to what is strictly necessary for age verification, and it requires the immediate deletion of data used in the process. Senator Julian Cyr, a Democrat from Truro who is openly gay, said that social media helped him find connections when he was a youth struggling with his sexual identity. If we get this policy wrong, we risk cutting off the young people who need those connections, he said, adding that the legislation walks a fine line to protect youth, but also allow them to find support. Evan Greer, the director of Fight for the Future, said that the bill passed by the Senate was massively improved, even though lawmakers did not pass Amendment 19, an amendment they were supporting that would have changed age verification requirements from opt-out to opt-in. The improvements to this legislation shows what can happen when lawmakers who are vested in enacting policies to keep young people safe online actually listen to marginalized communities, LGBTQ youth, and digital rights experts, Greer said. Despite failing to pass a critical amendment, Massachusetts still has an opportunity to lead the way in policymaking around tech by prioritizing the concerns of the most vulnerable populations online, and this is an important step towards that. The bill passed with the support of all but 2 senators. Durant, one of the senators who voted against the bill, said he wouldn't support it because he thinks it dismisses parental control. Moving inside the paper as we keep it local, firefighters respond to box truck fire on Route 6. Route 6 closed, by Rachel Devaney. A box truck that caught fire on Route 6 in Barnstable Friday morning shut down the highway, backing up traffic headed to the Cape. About 6 a.m., according to West Barnstable Fire Captain Austin Maloney, firefighters sent an engine and 2 tankers after getting a call about a truck fire on Route 6 East. The box truck was pretty well involved with flames, he said, but we were able to extinguish it. There were no injuries reported, according to Maloney. The cause of the fire, said Maloney, remains under investigation. The fire, though, he said, was big enough that firefighters shut down the eastbound highway, causing significant traffic delays towards the Cape. The highway remained closed while crews investigated, but has since been reopened. Hearing of ex-NHL player delayed on Cape Cod on child enticement charge, by Denise Coffey. In Barnstable, a hearing for former NHL player Eric Nicholas to change his plea in Barnstable Superior Court has been continued to July 24th. Judge Michael Callan approved the delay on Friday. Nicholas of West Barnstable was arrested on September 11th at a Hyannis apartment complex after police say he tried to rendezvous with someone he thought was a 16-year-old girl, but was actually a Barnstable police detective. He was charged with enticement of a child under 18 by using electronic communication. Detectives were on hand when Nicholas arrived at the Hyannis apartment complex where the meetup was supposed to be held. He was taken into custody without incident, according to police reports. A grand jury in Barnstable Superior Court returned 2 indictments against him on September 24th, charging him with electronic enticement of a child for commercial sexual activity and pay for sexual conduct with a child under 18. He pleaded not guilty to both charges on October 17th. On July 6th, Nicholas's attorney, Peter Lloyd, filed a request for a charge concession and sentencing memorandum. According to Boston Lawyer Blog, a charge concession occurs when the state agrees to reduce the charge against a defendant in exchange for a guilty plea or other concessions. A sentencing memorandum is a document submitted to the judge before sentencing to advocate for a sentence. One charge carries a maximum prison sentence of not more than 5 years, or a fine of not less than $2,500, or both. The second charge carries a maximum prison sentence of not more than 10 years in prison, a fine of not less than $3,000, and not more than $10,000, or both, whether such sexual conduct occurs or not. Judge Callan allowed the motion. Born in Hyannis, Nicholas played hockey for Barnstable High School and a variety of private schools before attending the University of New Hampshire, where he played for 4 years. He signed with the Boston Bruins in 1998 and played until 2001, and then from 2005 to 2006. He played for the St. Louis Blues and Chicago Blackhawks from 2002 to 2004. On to the Cape and Islands section. Dennis police report no beach-related arrests on July 4th, by Susan Vaughn. The detailed 4th of July preparations in Dennis were successful during a very busy day, Dennis police said, despite some issues that required attention in the evening. All of our preparations and information sharing were successful, as we didn't have any beach-related arrests, Dennis Police Sergeant Ryan Carr, Community Operations Unit Supervisor, said in a July 9th email. Our beach parking lots were full, beaches were extremely busy as anticipated, and traffic moved slowly throughout the town. Carr said the police, for the most part, managed to maintain a family-friendly atmosphere that our residents and visitors have come to expect on the 4th of July. As evening arrived, however, he said calls for service increased, and there were issues that needed attention that included fireworks complaints, large gatherings, intoxicated individuals, and similar issues. We had extra staff working and were able to meet all those challenges, Carr said. For the past 3 years, Dennis police and town officials have laid out strict regulations and planned for a heavy police presence at beaches, on roads, and high traffic areas throughout the town to ward off any problems experienced from 2019 to 2023. During that time, the police saw a dramatic increase in unsafe and dangerous conduct, particularly at Mayflower Beach. Chapin Memorial, Bayview, and West Dennis Beach this year were also the focus of restrictions, which included no daily parking passes sold on July 4th, parking bans in beach-adjacent neighborhoods, and no alcohol consumption. Since implementing the new regulations, arrests and disruptive activities have decreased dramatically, police said. We are in the process of determining what worked, what did not, and what we can do to improve for next year's Independence Day, which is always by far our busiest day of the year, Carr said. The other story in the Cape and Islands section of today's Cape Cod Times, dated July 13th, a Monday, UPS truck driver caused 3-vehicle crash in South Wellfleet, police said, by Rachel Devaney. A multi-vehicle collision, including a package delivery truck, slowed Friday traffic on the main artery to the outermost Cape Cod towns. 2 vehicles were stopped in traffic in South Wellfleet on Route 6 when they were struck from behind by a United Parcel Service truck at 11:55 a.m., according to the Wellfleet Police Department. The crash occurred on Route 6 at the intersection of Lieutenant Island Road, according to the department statement, and the impact damaged all 3 vehicles. Information about injuries related to the crash weren't immediately made available on Friday afternoon. The operator of the UPS truck will be cited for causing the crash, according to the statement. Traffic on Route 6 remained heavy throughout the area as first responders investigated the crash and removed vehicles from the roadway. Police said motorists should expect delays and seek alternate routes. And we'll continue our reading, moving into the sports section. For local sports, of course, since we're charged with making sure local comes first, the Cape Cod Baseball League Saturday Roundup. Harwich holds off Chatham in extras. The Mariners had a no-hitter through 9. Bats came up big in the 10th by Adam Kirkjian. The Harwich Mariners were in danger of losing a game in which they threw a no-hitter after 9 innings. The Mariners gave up a hit and run to the Chatham Anglers in the 10th inning, but Harwich brought enough bats in the bottom of the 10th to earn a 3-2 victory. The Mariners improved to 14-9. Chatham dropped to 10-11-2. For Harwich, Jacob Schultz of Vanderbilt went 5 innings, allowed 1 earned run, 4 walks, and no hits. He struck out 10 batters. T.J. Zierman of UNC Wilmington went 4 innings, allowed no runs, no hits, 5 walks, and struck out 7 batters. Thomas Mitchell of Elon went 1 inning, gave up 1 hit and a run, but earned the win. Angel Cervantes of UCLA pitched well as the starter for Chatham. He allowed 4 hits, no runs, no walks, and struck out 6 batters. The game was tied at 1 through 9 innings, and Harwich completed enough for an official no-hitter. Rob Rispoli of Connecticut broke up the no-hitter with a single in the top of the 10th inning. Chatham scored in that frame when Dre Barrett of Southern Mississippi came home on a fielder's choice. The Mariners answered in the bottom half. Nate Castellan of Cal Poly had an RBI single to tie it. Castellan went 2 for 5 with a run scored and an RBI. Jackson Hotchkiss of Washington hit a run-scoring base hit to provide the winning RBI. Chatham did not waste time early, scoring in the top of the first inning. Bino Waters of Notre Dame scored on a wild pitch to give the Anglers a 1-0 lead. The Mariners finally tied it up in the bottom of the 9th inning as Kevin Milewski of Mississippi State hit an RBI single. Milewski went 3 for 3 with an RBI. In other Cape Cod Baseball League action, it was the Brewster Whitecaps 7, the Cotuit Kettleeagers 4. The Whitecaps, who were 15-7-1, scored 2 runs in the 7th inning and another 2 in the 9th to come away with a win over the Kettleeagers, who were 8-13-2. Brewster's Holden Pantier of Walters State CC was the only Whitecaps player with 2 hits. He went 2 for 3 with 2 runs scored. Brewster scored its first run of the game in the top of the second inning. Pantier scored on a pass ball. Pantier scored again in the top of the third inning on a fielder's choice. Edward Yamin IV of Louisiana State singled to right field to score a run and tie it at 3 in the top of the sixth inning. Brewster scored 2 more runs in the top of the seventh to take a 5-3 advantage. Jamie Laskowski of William & Mary blasted a 2-run home run to right field, his second longest ball of the summer. Terrence Keel II of Texas A&M came home when the ball got away from the catcher after a strikeout for a run in the top of the ninth inning. A wild pitch allowed Laskowski to score later in that frame. It didn't take Cotuit very long to strike as the Kettleers scored 2 runs in the bottom of the first. Jesse DiMaggio of Westmont singled to center to bring in the game's first run, and Jake Hanley of Indiana then scored on a double steal. Hanley hit a sacrifice fly to center field to increase the Kettleers' lead to 3-1 in the bottom of the third. Chase Kroberger of Alabama scored on a fielder's choice at the bottom of the seventh inning. It was the Wareham Gatemen 7, the Hyannis Harbor Hawks 4. The Gatemen, who were 6-16, scored the game's first 6 runs, then kept the Harbor Hawks, who were 10-13, at bay to earn the win. R.J. Hamilton of Duke went 3 for 5 with a run scored and an RBI. Tony Lira of Arizona went 2 for 3 with a run scored and 2 RBI. The Gatemen scored in the bottom of the first inning as Hamilton scored on a wild pitch. Hamilton added an RBI single in the bottom of the second to give the Gatemen a 2-0 edge. Lira hit a 2-run double to left field in the bottom of the third inning. Cade Elam of Louisville scored on a fielder's choice. Henry DiGiorgio of Northeastern had an RBI single to bring in another run. And Noah Sheffield of Florida State RBI single brought in a run for the Gatemen in the bottom of the seventh. Hyannis scored in the top of the fifth inning. Will Fosberg of Northeastern scored on a sacrifice fly. Matt Iniich of West Virginia added an RBI single later in the inning. Jax Jimenez of Oregon then singled in another run for the Harbor Hawks. Taylor Kirk of Fordham scored on a bases-loaded walk in the top of the seventh inning. It was the Falmouth Commodores 4, the Bourne Braves 0. The Commodores, who were 10-11-1, pitched well in a shutout of the Braves, who were 10-10-3. Colby Putnam of Gardner-Webb, Braden Bergman of Baylor, and Logan Peaker of Michigan State combined on the shutout for the Commodores. They allowed just 5 hits and 1 walk. They combined for 9 strikeouts, including 4 from Bergman. Bergman had the win, 1-0, and Peaker earned his third save. Carter White of Central Florida had 3 hits and a run scored for Falmouth. Braden Jeffries of Michigan had 2 hits, a run scored, and an RBI. The Commodores scored the game's first run in the bottom of the fourth inning. White had an RBI single. White scored later in the frame on a sacrifice fly. Falmouth scored again in the bottom of the eighth inning when Fabio Peralta of Miami came home on a pass ball. Jeffress hit an RBI double later in the evening. It was the Orleans Firebirds 5, Yarmouth Dennis Red Sox 4. That was the final in 10 innings. The Firebirds, who were 7-16, handed the Red Sox, who were 19-3-1, a rare loss with an extra innings victory. After YD scored a run in the top of the 10th to take a 4-3 lead, the Firebirds answered in the bottom half. Bub Terrell of Auburn hit a line drive RBI single to center field that tied the score at 4-4. Jonathan Gomez of Fairleigh Dickinson singled home Terrell to seal the walk-off win for Orleans. For Orleans, Rowan Kelly of UC Santa Barbara went 3 for 4 with 3 runs scored. Dom Cadiz of UCLA went 2 for 5 with a run scored. Corey Nunez of UC Santa Barbara went 2 for 5 with 3 RBI. Terrell went 2 for 4 with a run scored and an RBI. The Firebirds scored the first run of the game in the bottom of the first inning. A Nunez base hit up the middle brought in the run. Nunez struck again in the bottom of the fifth inning with a 2-run single to tie the score. The Red Sox took the lead in the top of the third inning. Reed Howard of Western Kentucky doubled in 2 runs. Howard then came home later on a sacrifice fly. Kevin Takeuchi of Southern California hit an RBI single to left field to give the Red Sox a 4-3 lead in the top of the 10th, and then Takeuchi went 3 for 5 with an RBI. Howard went 2 for 4 with a run scored and 2 RBI. And there you have your Cape Cod Baseball League action for the weekend. And we've completed all of the local news that's in today's Cape Cod Times, dated Monday, July 13th of 2026. We'll move on to the national and international news. Graham's death leaves key Senate post open, by Zachary Schmirly of USA Today in Washington. The sudden death of Senator Lindsey Graham on July 11th at age 71 sent shockwaves through Capitol Hill, leaving lawmakers reeling from the unexpected passing of their longtime colleague. Graham's death marks the passing of a longtime conservative fixture in the Senate and one of President Donald Trump's closest political allies. It also opened up an important vacancy atop a key Senate committee, one that's increasingly an architect of some of the most consequential legislation affecting Americans' lives. He had traveled to Turkey earlier in the week for the NATO summit, followed by a meeting in Kyiv with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The lawmaker passed away from a brief and sudden illness, a statement posted to his social media account said, adding, "Senator Graham's family appreciates prayers at this time and asks for privacy during this incredibly difficult period." The South Carolina Republican was the powerful chairman of the Senate Budget Committee. The panel may sound like just another wonky corner of Congress, but it's much more than that. It's also the place where Trump's biggest second-term legislative wins have originated, and that's because budget bills only need a simple majority to survive, unlike other legislation in the Senate that requires 60 votes. Congressional Republicans on Trump's orders have become more and more accustomed to muscling big party line bills through the all-important budget panel. Just days ago, the president again directed them to use the Senate and House budget committees to attempt to pass a $350 billion Pentagon cash infusion in the coming months, all on top of a long-shot effort to pass a voting restrictions bill. Whoever replaces Graham atop the Budget Committee will play a key role in delivering on those GOP priorities, or trying to. Graham represented South Carolina in the U.S. Senate for more than 23 years after taking office in 2003, succeeding Senator Strom Thurmond. Before that, Graham served in the U.S. House of Representatives beginning in 1994. He was raised in the town of Central, South Carolina. Graham was the first in his family to attend college, earning both an undergrad degree and a law degree from the University of South Carolina, and he was a U.S. Air Force veteran as a JAG officer, or attorney. The senator was seeking a fifth term this year after winning a Republican primary in June. In his more than 3 decades in Washington, Graham got a reputation as a foreign policy hawk, and played a major role in crafting key pieces of legislation that affected millions of Americans' lives. One example came about a year ago with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which has since been rebranded by Republicans as the Working Families Tax Cuts Act. The massive piece of domestic policy legislation passed a year ago, reshaping the country from cuts to Medicaid and food stamps to overhauling federal student loans. Another recent bill Graham helped steer was the Secure America Act, which infused federal immigration enforcement agencies with an additional $70 billion. It passed both houses of Congress earlier this summer, even though Democrats boycotted it, saying they wanted significant reforms to immigrations and customs enforcement. Editorial note contributing to that story was Lisa Richardson of Greenville News. The other story on the Cape Cod Times front page today, White House sought to sidestep agency. Sources say methods reviewed before firings at Election Commission, by Aaron Banco and Bo Erickson of Reuters in Washington. The White House spent months looking for ways to bypass a federal election agency and use emergency powers to force changes to voting machines before President Donald Trump ousted its leaders on July 9th. 4 people familiar with the matter said. Some officials were frustrated with what they saw as the Election Assistance Commission's slowness in updating guidelines for states on voting machines, the sources said, while some also wanted it to add a proof of citizenship requirement to its national mail voter registration form and address other election-related priorities of this administration. Democratic lawmakers criticized the firings as an attempt to increase its control over elections, which are the purview of the states, and as undermining election integrity ahead of November's midterm elections when control of Congress will be at stake. Trump fired the bipartisan federal agency's 2 Democratic commissioners and allowed its lone Republican commissioner to resign, Reuters reported on July 9th. The agency's 4th commissioner departed in April. It wasn't immediately clear why Trump decided to force the commissioners out at this time or if they'll be replaced. The agency remains operational, but without a quorum, it can't take up any new business, such as implementing any changes to voting procedures or the National Mail Voter Registration Form. The administration from the start has been working across all agencies and local partners to safeguard elections for fraud and abuse, and investing in a strong infrastructure to sustain that mission, especially in the midterm elections, the White House said in a July 10th statement when asked about the discussions on sidestepping the commission. Trump and his allies have pressed Congress to adopt nationwide voting changes, arguing that some voting systems require upgrades, as Trump continues to falsely claim the 2020 election was stolen from him. In a July 9th statement confirming the firings, the White House cited a Supreme Court decision in June that granted the president more power to fire members of independent agencies. The president reserves the right to remove individuals that may not be totally aligned with the important task of securing America's elections, the statement said. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, called the dismissals a brazen attempt to seize control of our elections before a single vote is cast in the midterms. He's gutting the independent agency that certifies voting systems and helps election officials run secure elections, Schumer said. As early as last fall, White House officials reviewed a recommendation from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence to declare a national emergency and create a federal task force that could compel states to address vulnerabilities in voting systems without going through the Elections Commission, according to the 4 sources. The ODNI did not respond to a request for comment. The agency at that time was finalizing its probe of voting machines it had seized from Puerto Rico. ODNI officials concluded that there were flaws in the Puerto Rico machines that they believe could exist elsewhere, 2 of the sources said. Election experts have said the U.S. territory, which doesn't vote in presidential elections, lags the states in implementing the latest voting system guidelines. The report was never published, and the recommendation was never acted on, but complaints about the Elections Commission continued, the 2 sources said. During the same period, the 2 sources said, officials from the Department of Homeland Security, ODNI, and the White House met with the Commission's leaders to discuss their concerns, including flaws that they believe could have contributed to abnormalities in 2020, claims that have been widely and thoroughly debunked. The Elections Commission is responsible for setting guidelines for states on voting machine systems. Some Trump officials have argued internally that there are states operating with outdated software. 3 of the sources familiar with the conversation said that and felt the agency was moving too slowly to push for updates. Election administration experts said the commission often moves slowly in its work because voting systems are complex. The technology evolves, and policy changes involve extensive public feedback. The voting system guidelines haven't been updated too frequently because the process takes a long time, Matt Wheel, Vice President of Governance at the Bipartisan Policy Center and a former commission staffer, said in an interview. So yes, there is slowness, but that's not a bug, that's a feature of the system. The remaining commission staff can still test and certify equipment, as well as publish research and reports and distribute federal grant money, according to 2 people familiar with the process. Congress approved $45 million for the commission in fiscal year 2026 for grants to states to improve election systems. Since 2018, the commission has distributed more than $1.4 billion for election administration, according to the Congressional Research Service. We are a few minutes past the midway portion of our reading, and regular listeners, I'm sure, are aware it's at that stage that we move to a different kind of local news, which are the obituaries, death notices, and any memorials that are listed in that day's Cape Cod Times. And in the Cape Cod Times of Monday, July 13th, there are two obituaries. The first is of Helene Alden of Buzzards Bay. Helene Catherine née Grenda Alden passed away peacefully on June 25, 2026, surrounded by the love of her family, just 1 month shy of her 90th birthday. She was born in Wareham on July 24th of 1936. Helene lived a life defined by love, devotion, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to family. She shared nearly 67 wonderful years of marriage with her beloved husband, Frederick "Fred" Alden. Their names were rarely spoken apart, and for all who knew them, it was difficult to think of one without the other. Helene dedicated her professional career to the telephone company, beginning as an operator and retiring as a supervisor with decades of loyal service. While she was proud of her career, her greatest joy came from her family. Together, she and Fred worked tirelessly to provide opportunities for their children while building a home filled with love, laughter, and lasting values. She had a remarkable gift for making people feel important. Helene always asked how you were doing before speaking about herself, and she had an uncanny ability to remember the people and moments that mattered most. Her kindness, thoughtfulness, and genuine interest in others made everyone feel valued and remembered. She also found a cherished community at Church of the Good Shepherd, where she was an active member of the congregation and generously gave her time to many of its charitable initiatives. Her faith was reflected not only in what she believed, but in the kindness and compassion she shared with others. After retiring, Helene and Fred cherished spending winters in Port Charlotte, Florida. They enjoyed lasting friendships, countless card games, and many happy memories. She loved Christmas, treasured family traditions, and found her greatest happiness surrounded by her children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and dear friends. In her later years, Helene faced significant health challenges with extraordinary courage and determination. Through it all, she remained a source of strength, optimism, and love. The family she had spent a lifetime caring for found it a privilege to care for her in return. Helene was predeceased by her beloved husband Fred, and she is survived by many family and friends. If Helene left her family with one lasting lesson, it was that family always comes first, and that family is defined not only by blood or marriage, but also by the people we choose to love, support, and welcome into our lives. After nearly 3 years apart, we find comfort in knowing that Helene has been reunited with Fred, the love of her life. Their remarkable story of devotion continues together once again. Family and friends are invited to celebrate Helene's life on Wednesday, July 22nd, at the Church of the Good Shepherd, 74 High Street in Wareham. A visitation will be held from 9:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. It'll be followed by a funeral mass at 11 a.m. The burial will immediately follow at Massachusetts National Cemetery in Bourne. In lieu of flowers, memorial donations may be made to the Church of the Good Shepherd Memorial Fund. Donations may be made through the church's website, goodshepherdwareham.org, or mailed to the church at P.O. Box 719, Wareham, Mass. 02571. The other obituary in today's Cape Cod Times is of Michael Napolitano of Mashpee. Michael August Napolitano, 95, a 34-year Mashpee resident, passed peacefully at his home on July 7th. He was beloved husband of the late Camille née Zeno Napolitano of 63 years before her passing in 2017. Mike, as he was known by friends and family, was born February 16, 1931 in Hoboken, New Jersey, a place he was proud of. After high school, Mike graduated from Stevens Institute of Technology with a master's degree in engineering. While in school, he was a member of the Phi Sigma Kappa fraternity. Later, Mike proudly served his country in the Air Force. Following his time in the service, he became a mechanical engineer in the aerospace field, eventually retiring from Singer Kerfoot. Mike was a parishioner at Christ the King Parish in Mashpee and was a dedicated volunteer at the food pantry. He was a real Renaissance man. always trying new hobbies, including wood carving, painting, and making jewelry, just to name a few. He was best known for his extraordinary garden, and he made a mean limoncello. Most of all, Mike loved spending time with his family and friends, and will be missed dearly by all who had the pleasure of knowing him. He is survived by many family and friends. Visitation will be held Wednesday, July 15th, that's this coming Wednesday, from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. at Chapman Funerals and Cremations at 74 Algonquin Avenue in Mashpee. A funeral mass will follow on Wednesday, July 15th at 10:30 a.m. at Christ the King Church at 5 Job's Fishing Road in Mashpee. In lieu of flowers, any donations can be made to Christ the King Church Pantry Project, P.O. Box 1800, Mashpee, Mass. 02649, or online at christthekingparish.com. And that concludes the obituaries and death notices that are listed in today's Cape Cod Times. Our next headline, Political World pays tribute to Graham. Colleagues react to South Carolina Senator's sudden death. This is reported by James Powell, Zachary Schmelly, and Jay Stahl of USA Today in Washington. Tributes for Senator Lindsey Graham poured in from his colleagues early July 12th after the South Carolina Republican's office confirmed his sudden death the night before. Graham's death marks the passing of a longtime conservative fixture of the Senate, one of President Donald Trump's closest political allies. The lawmaker, who was 71, quote, passed away from a brief and sudden illness. A statement posted to his social media account said, adding, Senator Graham's family appreciates prayers at this time and asks for privacy during this incredibly difficult period. In his more than 3 decades in Washington, Graham played major roles in crafting key pieces of legislation, affecting millions of Americans' lives, while also developing a reputation as a foreign policy hawk. The Republican died just a year after helping shepherd through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act as the powerful chairman of the Senate Budget Committee. Trump called Graham one of the greatest people and senators I've ever known. He was always working and was a true American patriot, Trump wrote on social media. Lindsey will be greatly missed. Graham, an Air Force veteran and former state legislator, served for more than 3 decades on Capitol Hill. First came to the House of Representatives after victory in the 1994 elections, before later being elected to serve in the Senate in 2002, succeeding Strom Thurmond. He was a major backer of Israel in Washington and a fierce critic of Iran. In a June appearance on CBS News' Face the Nation, Graham said the United States would obliterate the Islamic Republic if the country contested control of the Strait of Hormuz, a key waterway that's become a main point of negotiation in the Iran war. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in a statement Israel had lost one of its greatest friends. Graham had also remained a vocal advocate for Ukraine, even as others in the GOP distanced themselves in recent years from outwardly supporting the war-torn nation. The senator had just returned from Kyiv, Ukraine's capital city, where he met President Volodymyr Zelensky on July 10th to discuss Ukraine's air defense needs and a Russia sanctions bill, after attending a NATO summit in Turkey earlier in the week. Good meeting with U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, Zelensky wrote July 10th on social media. This is already his 10th visit to our country, and we appreciate this support, Zelensky said. I'm grateful to Lindsey for recognizing our warriors. In a statement July 12th on his official X account, Zelensky said he was deeply saddened by the news of Graham's death, calling the senator a defender of freedom and the values that make our world safer. Our condolences go out to Lindsey's family, loved ones, and everyone who had the privilege of working alongside him, Zelensky said. Tributes for Graham poured in from colleagues and others in the early morning of July 12th. In a statement, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, a Republican from South Dakota, called Graham a trusted advisor and colleague, saying numerous presidents and heads of state have relied on his counsel. His influence on the federal judiciary, our national defense, and his beloved South Carolina will be felt for generations, Thune said. Senator Mike Lee, a Republican from Utah, said he would miss his infectious laugh, quick wit, and enthusiasm for life. Senator Roger Wicker, a Republican from Mississippi, chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, said there were no words to describe his impact on the foreign and domestic policy of the U.S. He stood solidly for freedom and strength, and he fought for liberty across the globe, Wicker said in a statement. Lindsey Graham can be succeeded in office but cannot be replaced. South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, in a Facebook post, remembered Graham as a statesman and friend. "My prayers are with his sister and the rest of his family," Scott said. From his humble beginnings to the Senate floor, Lindsey always led with faith, family, and South Carolina first. Lindsey remained committed to public service and doing what he loved. He always introduced levity and brought wit to the most challenging moments. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster called Graham the fiercest of fighters for South Carolina in America. In a statement that was posted to X, "Lindsey Graham is irreplaceable," he added. The Three Amigos. Longtime Graham family friend Meghan McCain, a former co-host of The View, mourned the senator's death in an early morning social media post July 12th. McCain, host of the Citizen McCain podcast, said she first met Graham when she was 11 after he attended a political event with her father, former Arizona Senator John McCain. Graham, her father, and the late Senator Joe Lieberman were longtime friends and dubbed themselves the Three Amigos. "My dad was the soul of the group, Joe was the heart of the group, and Lindsey was the fire and humor," McCain wrote. She said the trio remained friends throughout their lives, calling the bond rare and nearly extinct. "The memories I will hold dear of Lindsey is that was always the person you hoped you sat next to at a dinner party," McCain said. "Charming and very, very, very funny, like so funny he truly could have had a career in stand-up comedy. The news of his sudden passing is shocking and deeply saddening for me and my family," McCain said, noting Graham was a constant source of support to McCain's widow, Cindy McCain, in the wake of his 2018 death. But in the years after her father's death, Meghan McCain repeatedly criticized Graham, who had developed a close relationship with Trump, a foe of McCain's father. "Like many relationships in life, mine with Lindsey was complex in later years," she said. Graham's death has raised questions about Senate Republicans' 52-47 majority. Graham's former seat is now vacant, and former Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky has been hospitalized since June 14th. According to the 17th Amendment, governors can make temporary appointments and must hold special elections to fill Senate vacancies. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster will likely appoint a successor to fill Graham's seat and schedule a special election to replace him. The Senate is expected to return on July 13th after a 2-week recess. On to people in the news. King Charles meets Prince Harry's children for the first time since 2022. King Charles and Queen Camilla met Charles's son, Prince Harry, his wife Meghan, and their 2 children on July 10th at Charles's Highgrove estate in Western England, a palace source said on July 10th. It was Charles' first meeting with his grandchildren Archie, who's 7, and Lilibet, who's 5, since 2022. Harry has visited Britain just once or twice a year since he moved to the U.S. with Meghan and their children, after a high-profile falling out with his father and his elder brother, Prince William. The palace source described the meeting as a private family occasion and said no pictures, video, or further details would be released. Harry had appeared to be in a dispute with Buckingham Palace over security arrangements and where he would stay before he arrived for 5 days of charity events and the judgment in a major privacy case he brought against British media. Oscar winner Hopkins, who's 88 years old, signs a record deal as a composer. 2-time Oscar winner Anthony Hopkins released his first classical music single on July 10th, after signing a record deal as a composer. Broken Road features on his upcoming Life is a Dream album a collection of orchestral works written over 6 decades, revealing a composer whose music shares the same emotional depth and storytelling that define his screen career, labeled Decca Classic said. The 88-year-old Welsh-born actor who won Academy Awards for his performances in The Silence of the Lambs and The Father learned to play the piano at the age of 4 and went on to compose music for local plays as a teenager in the 1950s. "Music was my first desire, my first wish," Hopkins said in a statement. "I've been composing music all my life. Some of these pieces have lived with me for decades, and I still find myself returning to them." Life is a Dream, which will be released August 21st, features works Hopkins wrote during different periods of his life that were inspired by his childhood, loved ones, and his native South Wales. It's performed by Grammy Award-winning conductor Gustavo Dudamel and the Philharmonia Art Orchestra. It's been a true privilege to collaborate with the distinguished Philharmonia Orchestra and the virtuoso soloists cellist Gregorio Nieto and classical pianist Sergio Tiempo, Hopkins said. Swift paid $160,000 in fees for her recent New York City wedding, Mamdani says. New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani is sharing the hefty sum Taylor Swift paid the city for her Madison Square Garden wedding to Travis Kelce earlier this month. The newlyweds, who are both 36 years old, tied the knot in an extravagant ceremony at the iconic venue on July 3rd, which took over the streets of Manhattan and required the New York police to shut down the immediate vicinity. According to Mamdani, Swift shelled out 6 figures to make that happen. Taylor Swift has paid already the cost of the permit that was lodged, which was over $160,000 for that event, and for the response to that event, Mamdani revealed when asked how the Grammy winner was compensating for police overtime. That was a permit that was finalized, I think, in just the days before the event itself, he added. Swift's representative, Tree Payne, confirmed the couple officially said "I do" in one of the most anticipated events of the year on the evening of July 3rd. A sign outside the arena also displayed the message, "Just and T married," in the moments that followed. Rather than bridesmaids or groomsmen, Taylor Swift's brother, Austin Swift, was her man of honor, and Jason Kelce was Travis Kelce's best man. The bride and groom were dressed in Christian Dior haute couture, designed by creative director Jonathan Anderson, and Adam Sandler officiated the ceremony. The nuptials were estimated to have cost upward of $20 million and welcomed roughly 1,000 attendees. That was from USA Today Network and Reuters. Today in history. Today's July 13th. On this date in 1787, Congress passed the Northwest Ordinance, which created a governing framework for the Northwest Territory, an area northwest of the Ohio River, also known as the Old Northwest, as well as policies on how to add new states and laws protecting the civil rights of settlers. In 1793, on this date, Jean-Paul Marat, an outspoken journalist, one of the political leaders of the French Revolution, was stabbed to death in his bath by Charlotte Corday. In 1863, on this date, the New York City draft riots began as angered working-class citizens violently protested a federal military draft for the then ongoing American Civil War. The riots lasted for days. Hundreds of people were killed, with black residents being a primary target. In 1930, on this day, the first World Cup soccer matches were played, with France defeating Mexico 4-1 and the U.S. beating Belgium 3-0 in Montevideo, Uruguay. In 1939, on this date, legendary American crooner Frank Sinatra recorded his first single, "From the Bottom of My Heart," with trumpet-playing bandleader Harry James. In 1956, on this date, a Dartmouth workshop on artificial intelligence began in what's widely seen as the founding of AI as a research field. Computer scientist John McCarthy, a math professor, had coined the term AI there the previous year in co-authoring the workshop proposal with Marvin Minsky of Harvard, Nathaniel Rochester of IBM Corp., and Claude Shannon of Bell Telephone Laboratories. And in 1973, on this date, Alexander Butterfield, Deputy Assistant to President Richard Nixon, revealed the existence of secret Oval Office taping system to Senate investigators. Our final story, Iran expands attacks on Gulf states. Tehran again closes the Strait of Hormuz, by Steve Holland, Parisa Hafizi, Phil Stewart, and Yomna Ehab of Reuters. U.S. and Iranian forces have exchanged heavy missile and drone assaults, with Tehran targeting U.S. facilities in states across the Persian Gulf on July 12th and saying it had again closed the vital Strait of Hormuz. The strikes were the latest in a cycle of attacks and counterattacks as Iran seeks to assert control over shipping through the strait. However, the barrage marked an escalation in pace and range. The strikes extended to Qatar, a mediator in ceasefire talks that had not come under attack since April, while the United Arab Emirates, which had not been targeted since early May, said its air defenses had engaged missiles and drones from Iran. The renewed violence cast further doubt on the future of an interim U.S.-Iranian agreement that was signed last month, aimed to reopen the strait and end the war after a further 60 days of negotiations. In the past week, President Donald Trump has said he considers the ceasefire over, while leaving the door open to more talks. The war that began with U.S. and Israeli strikes against Iran on February 28th has destabilized the Gulf, while Iran's effective blockade of the strait has driven energy prices higher, fueling global inflation. Higher prices, especially for gasoline, are politically sensitive for Trump ahead of November's midterm elections. Iran has sought to establish a permanent system for collecting fees in the strait, which carried 1/5 of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas shipments before the war, and has warned vessels not to sail without its authorization. It said late July 11th that it had closed the waterway after firing a warning shot that struck a vessel traveling on an unauthorized route. The following day, it said it had disabled a second vessel. India said one of its nationals was missing after an attack on the container ship GFS Galaxy off the coast of Oman. Oman said 23 crew members had been rescued. Qatar advised all vessels, including leisure boats, fishing boats, and personal watercraft, to suspend activities. Iran's recently created Persian Gulf Strait Authority said on July 12th that passage through the strait was not currently possible due to recent illegal movements of the United States military forces in the region. Permits would be issued as soon as stability and calm are restored, it said. U.S. Central Command, however, said its forces were positioned to safeguard freedom of navigation, despite what it described as aggression, harassment, threats, and arbitrary declarations from Iran. Iran does not control the strait. Traffic is flowing, it said. The U.S. Navy-led Joint Maritime Information Center reiterated guidance that despite a severe security threat, an expanded southern route near Oman was available for two-way traffic. Central Command said U.S. forces hit 140 Iranian military targets July 11th and more than 300 over 3 nights of strikes this week to degrade Iran's ability to attack civilian mariners and commercial vessels freely transiting the strait. Iranian state media reported explosions in several port cities and said an Iranian army officer had been killed in U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran. In response, the guards said they had destroyed a command and control center and drone hangars in U.S. ally Jordan, targeted a U.S. radar site in Kuwait, attacked a U.S. aircraft carrier support and refueling platforms in Oman, and destroyed a jet maintenance center and command facility in Qatar. Qatar, which had previously said it would not act as a mediator so long as it was under attack, said 3 people, including a child, had been injured by falling shrapnel. It said Iran was fully legally responsible for the attack. The UAE said it detected missile threats outside its borders. Bahrain said it intercepted several Iranian aerial attacks. Jordan reported missile strikes, and Oman reported being targeted with drones. Oman said it had summoned Iran's ambassador to protest over drone attacks in 2 regions, and the U.S. Embassy in Oman told its nationals in Duqm and Musandam to shelter in place. And with that, we've come to the end of our reading of the Cape Cod Times for today, Monday, July 13th of 2026. This is your reader, Eric, saying be well, be safe, look after each other, and remember our veterans, especially those we've lost recently. Bye for now.